Part 6. Dracula. June 24th, before morning. Last night the Count left me early and locked himself into his own room. As soon as I had dared, I ran up the winding stair and looked out the window, which opened south. I thought I would watch for the Count, for there is something going on. The Sigani are quartered somewhere in the castle and are doing work of some kind. I know it, for now and then I hear a far-away muffled sound of a spade, and whatever it is, it must be the end of some ruthless villainy. I had been at the window somewhat less than half an hour when I saw something coming out of the Count's window. I drew back and watched carefully and saw the whole man emerge. It was a new shock to me to find that he had on the suit of clothes which I had worn whilst traveling here, and slung over his shoulder the terrible bag which I had seen the woman take away. There could be no doubt as to his quest, and in my garb too. This, then, in his new scheme of evil, that he will allow others to see me as they think, so that he may both leave evidence that I have been seen in the towns or villages posting my own letters, and that any wickedness which he may do shall, by the local people, be attributed to me. It makes me rage to think that this can go on, and whilst I am shut up here, a veritable prisoner, but without that protection of the law which is even a criminal's right and consolation. I thought I would watch for the Count's return, and for a long time sat doggedly at the window. Then I began to notice that there were some quaint little specks floating in the rays of the moonlight. They were like the tiniest grains of dust, and they whirled round and gathered in clusters in a nebulous sort of way. I watched them with a sense of soothing, and a sort of calm stole over me. I leaned back in the embrasure in a more comfortable position, so that I could enjoy more fully the aerial show. Something made me start up. A low, piteous howling of dogs somewhere far below in the valley, which was hidden from my sight. Louder it seemed to ring in my ears, and the floating motes of dust to take new shapes to the sound as they danced in the moonlight. I felt myself struggling to awake to some call of my instincts. Nay, my very soul was struggling, and half remembered sensibilities were striving to answer the call. I was becoming hypnotized. Quicker and quicker danced the dust. The moonbeams seemed to quiver as they went by me in the mass of gloom below. More and more they gathered till they seemed to take dim phantom shapes, and then I started, broad awake and in full possession of my senses, and ran screaming from the place. The phantom shapes, which were becoming gradually materialized from the moonbeams, were those of the three ghostly women to whom I was doomed. I fled and felt somewhat safer in my own room, where there was no moonlight and where the lamp was burning brightly. When a couple of hours had passed, I heard something stirring in the Count's room, something like a sharp wail quickly suppressed, and then there was silence, deep, awful silence, which chilled me. With a beating heart, I tried the door, but I was locked in my prison and could do nothing. I sat down and simply cried. As I sat, I heard a sound in the courtyard without, the agonized cry of a woman. I rushed to the window and, throwing it up, peered out between the bars. There indeed was a woman with disheveled hair, holding her hands over her heart as one distressed with running. She was leaning against a corner of the gateway. When she saw my face at the window, she threw herself forward and shouted in a voice laden with menace, "Monster! Give me my child!" She threw herself on her knees and, raising up her hands, cried the same words and tone which wrung in my heart. Then she tore her hair and beat her breast and abandoned herself to all violences of extravagant emotion. Finally, she threw herself forward, and though I could not see her, I could hear the beating of her naked hands against the door. Somewhere high overhead, probably on the tower, I heard the voice of the Count calling in the harsh, metallic whisper. His call seemed to be answered from far and wide by the howling of the wolves. Before many minutes had passed, a pack of them poured like a pent up dam when liberated through the wide entrance into the courtyard. There was no cry from the woman, and the howling of the wolves was short, but long. They streamed away singingly, licking their lips. I could not pity her, for I knew what had become of her child, and she was better dead. What shall I do? What can I do? How can I escape from this dreadful thing of night and gloom and fear? The morning of June 25th. No man knows till he has suffered from the night how sweet and how dear to his heart and eye the morning can be. When the sun grew so high this morning that it struck the top of the great gateway opposite my window, the high spot which it touched seemed to me as if it dove from the ark had lighted there. The dove from the ark had lighted there. My fear fell from me as if I had been a vaporous garment which dissolved in warmth. I must take action of some sort whilst the courage of the day is upon me. Last night was one of my post-dated letters went to post, the first of the fatal series which is to blot out the very traces of my existence from the earth. Let me not think of it. It has always been at night time that I have been molested or threatened or in some way in danger or in fear. I have not yet seen the Count in daylight. Can it be that he sleeps when others wake, that he may awake whilst they sleep? If I could only get into his room, but there is no possible way. The door is always locked, no way for me. Yes, there is a way, if one dares to take it. Where his body has gone, why may not another body go? I have seen himself crawl from his window. What should I not imitate him and go in by his window? The chances are desperate, but my needs is more desperate still. I shall risk it, and the worst, it can only be death, and a man's death is not a calf's, and the dreaded hereafter may still be open to me. God help me if in my task. Goodbye, Mina. If I fail, goodbye, my faithful friend and second father. Goodbye, all, and last of all, Mina. Some days later, same day later. I made the effort, and God helping me, have come safely back to this room. I must put down every detail in order. I went whilst my courage was fresh straight to the window on the soft side, and at once got outside of the narrow ledge of stone which runs around the building on this side. The stones are big and roughly cut, and the mortar has, by process of time, been washed away between them. I took off my boots and ventured out on the desperate way. I looked down once so as to make sure that the sudden glimpse of this awful depth would not overcome me, but after that kept my eyes away from it. I knew pretty well that the direction and distance of the Count's window, and made for it as well as I could have regard to the opportunities available. I did not feel dizzy. I suppose I was too excited, and the time seemed ridiculously short till I found myself standing on the window sill and trying to raise up the sash. I was filled with agitation, however, when I bent down and slid feet foremost in through the window. Then I looked around for the Count, but with surprise and gladness made a discovery. The room was empty. It was barely furnished with odd things that seemed to never been used. The furniture was something the same style as there in the south rooms, and it was covered with dust. I looked for the key, but it was not in the lock, and I could not find it anywhere. The only thing I could find was a great heap of gold in one corner, gold of all kinds, Roman and British and Austrian and Hungarian and Greek and Turkish money, covered with a film of dust as though it had laid long in the ground. None of it that I had noticed less than 300 years old. There were also chains and ornaments and some jeweled, but all of them old and stained. At one corner of the room was a heavy door. I tried it, for since I could not find the key of the room or the key of the other door, which was the main object of my search. I must make further examination, or all my efforts would be in vain. It was open and led through a stone passage to a circular stairway, which went steeply down. I descended, minding carefully where I went, for the stairs were dark, being only lit by loopholes in the heavy masonry. At the bottom there was a dark tunnel like passage through which came a deathly, sickly odor, the odor of an old earth newly turned. As I went through the passage, the smell grew closer and heavier. At last I pulled open the heavy door, and which stood ajar, and found myself in an old ruined chapel, which had evidently been used as a graveyard. The roof was broken, and in two places were steps leading to vaults by the ground, and had recently been dug over, and the earth placed in a great wooden boxes, manifestly those which had been brought by the Slovaks. There was nobody about, and I made search for any further outlet, but there was none. Then I went over every inch of the ground, as so not to lose a chance. I went down even into the vaults where the dim light struggled, although to do so was a dread to my very soul. Into two of those I went, but I saw nothing except fragments of old coffins and piles of dust. In the third, however, I made a discovery. There, in one of the great boxes, of which there were 50 in all, on a pile of newly dug earth, lay the Count. He was either dead or asleep, I could not say which, for the eyes were open and stony, but without the glassiness of death, and the cheeks had the warmth of life, though all their pallor. The lips were as red as ever, but there was no sign of movement, no pulse, no breath, no beating of the heart. I bent over him and tried to find any sign of life, but in vain. He could not have lain there long, for the earthly smell would have passed away in a few hours. But the side of the box was its cover pierced with holes here and there. I thought he might have the keys on him, but when I went to search, I saw the dead eyes, and in them, dead though they were, such a look of hate, though unconscious of me or my presence, that I fled from the place, and leaving the Count's room by the window, crawled up again up the castle wall, regaining my own room, and threw myself panting upon the bed, and tried to think. June 29th. Today is the date of my last letter, and the Count has taken steps to prove that it was genuine, for again I saw him leave the castle by the same window, and in my clothes. As he went down the wall, lizard fashion, I wished I had a gun or some lethal weapon, that I might destroy him, but I fear that no weapon wrought alone by man's hand would have any effect on him. I dared not wait to see him return, for I feared to see those weird sisters. I came back to the library and read there till I fell asleep. I was awakened by the Count, who looked at me as grimly as a man can look, as he said, "Tomorrow, my friend, we must part. You return to your beautiful England, I to some work which may have such an end that we may never meet. Your letter home has been dispatched. Tomorrow I shall not be here, but all shall be ready for your journey. In the morning come to the Sugani, who have some laborers of their own here, and also some Slovaks. When they have gone, my carriage shall come for you, and shall bear you to the Borgo Pass to meet the diligence from Buckvanio to Bistrick. But I am in hopes that I shall see more of you at Castle Dracula." I suspected him and determined to test its sincerity. Sincerity? It seems like a profanation of the word to write it in connection with such a monster. So I asked him point blank, "Why may I not go tonight?" "Because, dear, my coachman and horses are away on a mission." "But I would walk with pleasure. I want to get away at once." He smiled, such a soft, smooth, diabolical smile that I knew there was some trick behind his smoothness. He said, And your baggage? I do not care about it. I can send for it some other time. The Count stood up and said with a sweet courtesy which made me rub eyes, it seemed so real. You English have a saying which is close to my heart, for its spirit is that which rules our boyars. Welcome the coming, speed the parting guest. Come with me, my dear young friend. Not an hour shall you wait in my house against your will, though sad am I at your going, and that you suddenly desire it. Come. With a stately gravity, he with the lamp preceded me down the stairs and along the hall. Suddenly he stopped. Hark! Close at hand came the howling of many wolves. It was almost as if the sound sprang up at the rising of his hand, just as music of a great orchestra seems to leap under the baton of the conductor. After a pause of a moment, he proceeded, in his stately way, to the door, drew back the ponderous bolts, unhooked the heavy chains, and began to draw it open. To my intense astonishment, I saw that it was unlocked. Suspiciously, I looked all around, but could see no key of any kind. As the door began to open, the howling of the wolves grew louder and angrier. Their red jaws and chomping teeth, and their blunt clawed feet, as they leapt, came in through the opening door. I knew then that to struggle at the moment against the Count was useless. With such allies as these at his command, I could do nothing. But still the door continued slowly to open, and only the Count's body stood in the gap. Suddenly it struck me that this might be the moment and means of my doom. I was to be given to the wolves, and at my own instigation. There was no diabolical wickedness in this idea, just enough for the Count, and at last chance I cried out, Shut the door! I shall wait till tomorrow, and covered my face with my hands to hide my tears of bitter disappointment. With one sweep of his powerful arm, the Count threw the door shut, and the great bolts clanged and echoed through the hall as they shot back into their places. In silence, we returned to the library, and after a minute or two, I went to my own room. The last I saw of the Count was his kissing his hand to me, with a red light of triumph in his eyes, and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of. When I was in my own room and about to lie down, I thought I heard a whispering at my door. I went to it softly and listened. Unless my ears deceived me, I heard the voice of the Count. Back, back to your own place. Your time is not yet come. Wait, have patience. Tonight is mine. Tomorrow night is yours. There was a low, sweet ripple of laughter, and in rage I threw open the door and saw without the three terrible women licking their lips. As I appeared, they all joined in a horrible laugh and ran away. I came back to my room and threw myself on my knees. It is then so near the end. Tomorrow, tomorrow, Lord, help me and those to whom I am dear. June 30th, the morning. These may be the last words I ever write in the diary. I slept till just before the dawn, and when I woke, threw myself on my knees, for I determined that if death came, he should find me ready. At last I felt the subtle change in the air, and knew that the morning had come. Then came the welcome cock crow, and I felt that I was safe. The glad heart, I opened my door and ran down the hall. I had seen that the door was unlocked, and now escape was before me. With hands that trembled with eagerness, I unhooked the chains and drew back the massive bolt. But the door would not move. Despair seized me. I pulled and pulled at the door and shook it till, massive as it was, it rattled in its casement. I could see the bolt shot. It had been locked after I left the Count. Then a wild desire took me to obtain the key at any risk, and I determined then and there to scale the wall again and gain the Count's room. He might kill me, but now, death now seemed the happier choice of evils. Without a pause, I rushed up to the east window and scrambled down the wall. As before, into the Count's room. It was empty, but that was as I expected. I could not see a key anywhere, but the heap of gold remained, and I went through the door in the corner and down the winding stair and along the dark passage to the old chapel. I knew well enough where to find the monster I sought.